Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is part 2 of my conversation with Danny Taylor, who you mostly know from the band A Foot in Cold Water and also Lords of London and Nucleus. Where we left off in part 1, Danny was just talking about how he and the remaining members of Nucleus connected with guitarist Paul Nauman, and then how they would go on to form A Foot in Cold Water. So now, here we go with part 2 of episode 114 featuring Danny Taylor. Alright, back to the show.
We hung around a little bit, really were kind of unsure where we wanted to go, and Greg eventually left, and that's when the three of us, myself and Huey and Bob, were just without a guitar player at that point in time. And we'd always loved Paul Nauman when he used to play in a band in the village called Leather. Young kid, great vibrato. John, our guitar player, loved this kid. And he had a great creative mind, very melodic mind. And oddly enough, when we were sitting and looking at guitar players, we tried a couple out. And we were living at a farm up in Brome, not too far from a legendary figure, name that you probably recognize, Bill Lishman, Father Goose.
Okay. Editor's note. Bill Lishman was known at the time as a sculptor, filmmaker, inventor, and a naturalist, and a pioneer of ultralight aviation. In 1988, he became the first person to lead the flight of geese with an aircraft, and in 1993, he was the first to conduct an aircraft-led migration of birds. There's a lot about Bill Lishman online. Check it out. Now, back to the show.
They did the movie about him, Fly Away Home. Anyway, he was our neighbor next door, and we had many conversations about guitar players. We had a couple of guys that he had recommended. And Kathy Young one day said, I was down in the village the other day, and Paul Nauman was looking to hook up with you guys. And we said, this is great. So we said, we're definitely interested. So we had arranged to go and visit him out at his farm out in the West End somewhere. And at the same time, we didn't realize that he was coming to see us. So we ended up going to his band. He had a band out there, and we're looking for Paul, and he wasn't there, and he came to where we were, and we weren't there. So it almost never happened. It almost never happened. And we were up in Brome then. To make a long story short, we finally did get together and brought Paul in, and he said, this is great. He said, but I'm not leaving without my singer, Alex Machin. And I said, okay, well, we weren't really looking for a singer, but none of us could really sing. So,
Yeah.
So
the harsh truth
we ended
and
up
reality.
doing it, and that was it. He brought a couple of original songs in, handled with Karen a few things, and we had a couple of other songs going on. We sort of maintained that underground kind of chunk that we had with Nucleus, but simplified the whole thing. And it was funny because right around that time, I was looking to simplify our music because Nucleus was very, very creative, but it was also really busy. And I felt that, I really wanted to, after seeing Led Zeppelin, I realized how good they were and how simple they were. They were doing a lot of cover stuff, but at the same time, they were in the area that I was trying to head to, but didn't know it. So when Paul and Alex joined us, when we ended up writing songs together, we had a fair bit of success in the early days.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, you talk about simplifying things, but the elements of sophistication were still there with A Foot in Cold Water. Now, I remember hearing Make Me Do Anything You Want when I was in high school, and, I was impressed. It was a pop song, yes, and hence why it was so popular. But one thing that sticks out to me is the bridge up to the guitar solo. That
yes.
And the lead up to the guitar solo, that is innovative. It's interesting, and it takes it from just like the rest of the song is pretty much the same chord progression, which is pretty cool, no doubt.
Yeah, open D, drop D tuning.
Yeah, and the guitar solo in that song, that is one of those, I love that style. It's melodic, you can hum it, and it's got passion. It reminds me of my favorite lead guitar solo of all time is George Harrison, Something. And Paul's solo in Make Me Do Anything You Want is right up there. It's brilliant. It's simple, it's singable, hummable, and it's brilliant. But it was the arrangement of the song that allows that to happen. Editor's note, I couldn't help myself. Here is that iconic lead guitar solo featuring the late Paul Nauman.
You're giving me goosebumps.
Yeah.
Honestly, when he and I wrote that song, I had been working on a song with Huey called Morning Rain, and Huey didn't like it because it sounded like Gord Lightfoot. Even though it was nothing like a Gord Lightfoot song, the title was similar, Early Morning Rain. So basically, he didn't want to do it. And I said, it sounds more like the Classic 4, our version. But anyway, long story short, I had these lyrics kicking around in my head, and I was out somewhere. Paul and I had moved from the farm, and we had an apartment in Scarborough. And I came in one day, and he was playing this tuning with another guitar player, a friend of ours, Kenny Walton. And it was a tuning which I'd never heard before. He lowered the E strings to D. It wasn't open D tuning, it was drop D. And Joni Mitchell used it a lot, and then we also found out later that Zeppelin had used it in a couple of songs. And it gave the chord progression a unique sound. And it immediately triggered this creative thing in me where I started singing, "In the morning light." And I just looked at Paul and said, "Feels so good." I mean, we started laughing at each other. And then it just went on from there. And I had been sort of, really unsure of where I was going at that point in time. I was saying, I was praying to God one day, and I said, "God, what have you done to me? You've taken me from the Lords of London all the way to here. What do you want from me? Like, show me what you want, and whatever it is, I'll do whatever you want." But I didn't know where I was going. And when I heard this chord progression, I knew exactly what was coming. I just knew that something great was going to come of it.
And we'll be right back after this.
And we started to write the song around there, and I put the lyrics to it and the melody. But the thing in the middle was Paul's, he wanted to have something creative, and that worked for me. And the song was really simple. But the climb up, the arpeggio going up, was totally his idea. And it was funny when he got to it, we did so many bars of a solo, but we didn't know where to go from there. So we're in rehearsal, and we're playing it to the band, and I'm looking at Bob's face, as we go through the lyrics and everything, and he's cringing. Because this was not a song that basically Foot was used to doing. I mean, we were hard rock, and this was a very melodic song. And, they were looking at it going, yeah, but they liked the climb and the arpeggio going up. And then, so we played it a couple of times, and we said, okay, so we did the solo, and it just ended. And we sort of looked around and said, so what's next? And we said, we don't know. We haven't got that far yet. We just got the verse and this climb, and we didn't even have the solo together at that point. And while we were sitting there, Huey is tinkering around the bass. Now, Huey's a really creative guy. He's a great guitar player as well as a great bass player, and he's a great songwriter. What he did was he started tinkering around the bass. He's doing this fourth and just repeating it over and over again. And I looked at him and I said, "Huey, what is it you're doing there?" And he says, "I'm not doing anything, man." And he's like really defensive. "What? I'm not doing anything." And I said, No. I said, "Can you play it again?" So he sort of looked at me and said, "What? This?" He says, "Just tinkering." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I love it." He said, "You do?" Of course, now he gets his shoulders back. He's putting with bravado and he starts to play this thing, right? I said, "I don't want all four bars. I just want three. And then I want you to play this." I sang it out to him. He goes, diddle-diddle-diddle-ding, diddle-diddle-diddle-ding, diddle-diddle-ding. And I go, da-da. And then the band answers like Nucleus, bum, bum, and back into it. And we did the round. The round came around. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Brilliant.
It came in a full circle. And we just said, awesome, this is it. But by the time it was all said and done, the song was over 5 minutes long. So when we took it up to the record company, they said, "Oh, yeah, never be a single." That's okay. We didn't think it would be a single anyway. We're thinking more like a Stairway to Heaven type thing, right? Anyway, when we did it, they started to get airplay. And I think initially it went up to something like 15 or something in the chum chart. But the record company and the radio station said it was too long. So they edited it down. And they cut out half the solo. So if you look on TV, you'll see us playing this thing that we think we were doing Kenny Rogers' show. It was called... I can't remember.
Rolling on the River.
Yes, thank you, Rolling on the River. And we did a cut-down version of that, and that's what they put out there on AM radio. Well, then when we did the Island record in the States, And we did the Electra Asylum record in the States. We did it with John Anthony. It was a redo of our first 3 albums, if you like, about 2.5. And then they redid it again with a rock version, same solo, but without the strings and all the fancy stuff, and cut it down a little bit and re-released it in the States. Then all of a sudden the AM station started picking it up in Canada, and that's all they were playing was the American version. And then the FM station said, well, we've got the long version. They went back to the first version.
And you know what makes it even more confusing is that when Helix covered that song in '84, they pretty much covered the short version note for note. So, and I've often been listening to the radio and somebody says, and that was Helix. And I'm thinking, no, that was A Foot in Cold Water, because they covered your short version pretty much note for note, right down to now. I think that Paul Hackman, who's also passed on a number of years ago, I think that he was paying tribute to Paul Nauman by covering that solo note for note. But when I've only recorded a few covers in my career, and when I do, I try and make it completely different and put my own stamp on it. But I think that must have been the mindset with Paul Hackman when he covered that solo with Helix, because I mean it is a brilliant solo, absolutely, and the song was brilliant. And there's not too many bands that can say that they've had the same song on the charts twice a few years apart.
Yeah, it was funny. Sometimes a different version.
Right. Yeah.
And then when Helix came out, they were listening to that as well. It was unique. And what's really amazing to me, and I'm really grateful that it has stood the test of time like it has. And that thing has been inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame and everything. I mean, that song, that classic solo, is even on YouTube with a guitar teacher showing people how to play it note for note. I've seen that. But that was and still remains a classic solo. The funny thing was, when we went into the studio to record it, he never did have a definitive solo down. And it was funny because Lee DiCarlo was our engineer. He was excellent. He worked with the Ramones and everything. He was out of New Jersey. And he was able to piece together a couple of different solos to give that one solo continuity so that it made sense. But in the initial, like he would do the first few bars or whatever, and then he'd go off and do a different melody and come back and do a different solo and have a nice ending at the end and something in the middle that was really good. So Leo said, just give me a few minutes. And he sort of pieced all this stuff together and came up with a solo that isn't identical to the one that Paul plays, but was close enough that Paul took it from there and then just nailed it on a single solo track. And from there, we just walked around there. We were just sort of like in awe of how good he was. He was a tremendous player.
No doubt. Now, I did watch the video at the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame, and it would appear to me that there was no guitar player on stage.
You might be talking about the 2019 with Alex and me and Huey?
I think if the video was from 2020, the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and that was, Alex was singing it, and Huey was playing bass, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. That was the Parachute Club, was the backup band.
Oh.
And
okay.
David Gray was the guitar player. And I'm not sure that this is the same one we're talking about, but a couple of girls, background singers?
Yes. I think what happened then is, it's curious because on the video you don't see a guitar player. But, and yet you can hear the solo. And in fact, they pan the camera to Huey on bass. And I'm thinking, that's, and that's not really that uncommon. I've seen that many times on TV shows, where they don't know who's playing what.
They don't know.
And one of the funniest things I ever saw on video was Ray McGuire, the lead singer from Trooper, on the old Canadian talk show, the Al Hamill Show, in the late 1970s. And Trooper's on there doing their major hit, We're Here for a Good Time. And then at the end of that performance, Ray sits down with Al, and before Al Hamill has a chance to ask him any questions, Ray looks at him and says, "So, what'd you think of my lip-synced harmonica solo?"
Oh, geez, yeah. Well, you know what? You're probably absolutely right, because I remember seeing the video, but I never really got a copy of it because I was playing, obviously. I just saw a quick one. And I think they didn't know where to look. I think David Gray was sort of like off in the background, didn't really want to be front and center. It was unique because they were backing up most other artists. And when it came to doing that song, the organizer said to me, "Would you sing it?" And I said, "Well, that's great, but you probably don't want me to sing it." "Well, didn't you sing it?" And I said, "Well, in the beginning, yeah." But Alex was the one that everyone recognizes. "Oh, do you think he'd sing it?"
And we'll be right back after this.
And I asked him, and he hadn't been on stage for quite a while. So when I went to him and approached him, he said, "I don't know about that one. I have to, warm up." So anyway, he did. He did a great job. And then when I went back to the organizer, I said, "You know what? I think I might be able to get the bass player to come out." And they thought that was fantastic. So I actually ended up getting Huey, myself, and Alex to play live at that gig. And that was basically just sort of off the cuff. It just sort of happened.
Well, that's awesome. And it's interesting that the Parachute Club was the backup band. I've interviewed Jerry Young on this show. He was their manager and with Current Records. And their story is quite interesting as well. But it's not about the Parachute Club here today. This is about you. So you've had all those past successes. Now, I understand that you and Alex have worked on some recent material, and I did get the opportunity to check out one of those songs on YouTube. Now, I understand that the first one is a political statement.
Yes. Yeah. How Long?
Right.
I love that song. Basically, Alex and his son, Connor, did the video on that. Connor did the video and put it all together and pieced it together. And that was basically one of our first attempts at recording in his mini studio in his basement. We have a rehearsal studio in my house with drums, amps, and all that kind of stuff. But we haven't rehearsed for a while. A lot of the guys are having issues with their bodies breaking down, and Huey's unable to get around right now at the moment. He's got some hip issues, and Alex has had some issues with his vocal cords, and basically I had some arthritis. I mean, everyone is getting to the point where we're not young anymore. So it's difficult to even get together to play or even think about playing, although there's a lot of offers out there for us to play. So you never know. I mean, it could happen. But How Long was his first endeavor with being able to put a song together in his basement on his Apple. And so I'm playing these little electronic drums, and you got to, I laugh my ass off when I went to sit on them because they're the size of a pie plate.
Right.
And they belong to his son, right? And I've got to sit down here and try to hit the drum head in the middle. I said, "Are you kidding me?" Like, I mean, I've got like 16-inch floor tom and 12 and 14, 13-inch drums, and I got to hit this little pie plate, right? So, but when they played me the song, what we did was we went and we sampled the drum kit, and I found my kit, my original, like I own one kit of 69 Rogers drum. And it's this 22-inch bass drum with a 12, 13, 14, and 16-inch floor tom. And I've got about 5 or 6 different snare drums. And I tuned these guys up for the studio, filled up all the lugs with axle grease, got out all the ring, tuned them to a note. I mean, these things don't go out of my house. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And I've got about 4 or 5 snare drums. I got a wooden Gretsch, a 42-strand chrome. I've got Rogers Dynasonics. I've got, all kinds of stuff. And Luba foot pedals is the ones that I'm using at the moment. I used to use Gretsch floating actions, but the Luba's got more attack. Anyway, to make a long story short, when I was looking at drum sounds, I was sampling my kit. I listened to everybody, like John Bonnen's kit, and I got all these different bass drums and all these different sounds. But I said, if we're going to do like this song, we'll make it sound like Foot. We'll get Huey to play bass, and you can sing it, and I'll play drums. And we'll get Mike Hall to play guitar. Mike Hall actually played with Foot. He also played with Helix. And he's back in town now, and he put the guitar part on that. He actually has had some experience playing with Foot and Cold Water and learning all the songs. He's a great, great guitar player. But we couldn't get Huey out, so Alex was playing bass. And we didn't really get the bass sound that we wanted on there. So I put this big bass drum thing on with a single Rogers bass drum and got the sound just like my Rogers kit and started with this tom fill. The snare, dun, 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 and a triple, and Mike comes in and he goes, "Oh my God," he said, "Whoa," and he hits the guitar, and it was like, whoa, magic, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I had to keep the drums fairly simple because basically I couldn't hit them to make them sound the same. I mean, I was hitting them all over the head and they weren't sounding right, and it was just a nightmare to try to record them. But I think we did okay. But we sort of want to touch that song up a little bit. But the statement itself is basically about what we see from being a northern neighbor to what was happening in the United States, especially during the Trump fiasco. The January 6th riots and the lead-ups to that with the George Floyd killings and, Black Lives Matter and Ku Klux Klan. I mean, we experienced all that stuff in the early days of Nucleus going across into the States. In the 60s, we were seeing this firsthand, and it hasn't changed. So the thrust of this song was like, how long does this keep going on? Like, how long? And so we just threw it out there to see what would happen. And it's got a fair number of views on YouTube, but we haven't released it as a record. This was just a demo, and I think it turned out really well.
It did, absolutely. Well,
you like it. You saw it. You said you did.
I did enjoy it, yes. And it sounds to me, my credo of late has been, I am making my music for the love of the music and for the people who love the music. And it sounds to me like that's where you guys are at these days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because
love that song. And Alex wrote, this was Alex's baby, and he did a fabulous job with this song.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to recommend everybody check it out, How Long? And it's actually by A Foot in Cold Water. It is on YouTube, and it's a great song. It absolutely is. Listen, Danny, I know that you've got other things to do. I don't want to take up your whole day. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this with me here. And until next time, cheers.
My pleasure.
Well, I do hope that you enjoyed the conclusion of my conversation with Danny Taylor. And if you did, hey, why don't you hit like and please subscribe. Now, here, for your listening pleasure, is Danny Taylor with A Foot in Cold Water featuring Alex Machin on lead vocals. And their latest release, if you can believe it, from A Foot in Cold Water. Here is How Long. Enjoy. Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including recording, editing, guest acquisition, etc. And hey, here's some news. We've just recently joined forces with 519 Magazine, so you can check out my interviews there as well. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a clip from my original composition, The Burn, all rights reserved. If you enjoy the show and you'd like to help us keep it going, why don't you click on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. We really appreciate it. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, cheers.